Welcome back into the College Football Every Game on the Board podcast, part number 2 with our two-hole hitter here, Matt Josephs from ESPN Richmond at Mid-Major Matt on Twitter. Matt, welcome in. How you feeling?
Feeling good. Hopefully we bounce back. Last week, the spot was absolutely perfect, but unfortunately the team was not perfect. Wake Forest really did not play very well at all. And I don't know if you saw, but like Dave Clawson was so sad after the game. He's like, I let the team down. Our offense is broken. This has been a miserable season. So at least he was sad after the game that he lost it for all of our viewers.
Hey, bounce back mode for the best bets is what Matt is talking about here, guys. And hey, we got a lot of games to break down and a best bet coming your way. 345-346 Tulane FAU. Down to 381, 382, New Mexico, Fresno State. That is the section of games for this episode. It's a 4-part episode with Every Game on the Board, wherever you're downloading your podcast at Every Game on the Board. Starting off here, Tulane FAU, kicking us off on Saturday from Boca Raton, Matt. We get the Green Wave laying 9.5 at BetOnline as the road favorite, 47 being the total. Tulane heading to South Florida here, taking on the Owls. You like anything?
So this is an interesting handicap here because obviously Tulane was the highest Group of 5 team in the latest college football playoff rankings, but they were 24. Here's the aspect of this game that makes it very interesting. This week, the NCAA is ruling on JMU's appeal in terms of whether or not they could become bowl eligible. My guess is the next week, if they say JMU can become bowl eligible, they're going to play in the Sun Belt Championship game because they're going to win this weekend. They're going to clinch it, and then they're going to play the Sun Belt Championship game. And then if they win the Sun Belt Championship game, I think they're ahead of Tulane. Tulane's been not very good lately. Like, they've played some poor. Only beat Tulsa 24-22 last week. Tulsa just gave up, 150 to SMU the week before? It was so bad. So, there could be an interesting aspect to this game that if somehow the JMU news comes out and it might change Tulane's outlook, they need to win games and they need to look spectacular to do so. So when we look at a lot of these games for this week, to me, it's going to be very simple. Is there bowl eligibility at stake? Is there conference championship at stake? Is there a new coach that teams are going to still try hard for? If there's teams that are not bowl eligible and they've got old coaches, we're going to skip them pretty quick. Tulane here is in first place, tied with SMU and UTSA. They host UTSA next week. So they want to get in this game. They want to win. They want to win by margin, and they want to get out. FAU looked horrendous last week, 22-7, the loss to East Carolina. They play at Rice next week. They need 2 wins for bowl eligibility. They're going to try hard for Tom Herman here. There's also the aspect of 10 to 15 mile per hour winds. Of course, that's the one thing you kind of look at here because winds can affect your game plan. I kind of lean a little bit to FAU here. We haven't seen anything from Tulane the past month or so that says they're going to win this game by margin. I would also wait, though, see what happens to the line if the JMU news gets announced before then, because that'll certainly affect Tulane's thinking entering this one.
But Matt, a follow up on that, they're not going to approve it, are they? I mean, they never do. They've never done that in the past. When Georgia Southern has done this, they're going to say no in terms of making a bowl game because they don't want FCS teams jumping up to FBS and then realizing they don't want to do it anymore and going back. That's the whole reason behind the rule, right?
So they changed the rule already, and part of the reason they changed the rule is the money aspect. The money was too small beforehand. Now the money is serious to make the move. JMU did what they were supposed to the first year. They played a full FBS schedule. They're playing a second full FBS schedule this year. Yes, most likely, Drew, you are correct. The waiver is not going to get approved, but I think it's interesting. College game days is Saturday is in JMU. Would you rather have the NCAA get 3 hours of, hey, you're awesome because you approved the waiver for the best Group of 5 team in America? Or would you rather have 3 hours of the NCAA is the worst entity in the world? Remember, they denied Tez Walker his waiver to North Carolina. And then several weeks later, new information came out and then he got approved. And there's no new information. They basically realized that they were wrong in that situation and he got approved. I think there's a small chance JMU gets approved in this one.
Interesting. All right, guys. One game in the book. We got about 18 more to go here. ECU and Navy, 31.5 being the total. No, that's not a team total. That's the game total. -2 in the hook. That is Navy at home as the favorite. If you do like ECU, BetOnline hang in the 3 so you can catch them +3. Anything here with the Pirates and the midshipmen?
So because we have so many games, I'm going to say it here, and I'll probably say it again on the end. This is probably, as we go through the thing, my best bet for the segment. We'll keep going. We'll see if anything else pops up, but most likely Navy money line is my best bet. East Carolina got their win last week. They won 22-7. They're 2-8 on the season. They have nothing to play for. What motivation does East Carolina have to get ready for a triple option in this situation? Navy gets the win last week over UAB. They look really good. There is 16 to 20 mile per hour winds in this one, which will kind of take care of East Carolina's passing game, even though East Carolina's passing game is pretty bad. Navy needs 2 wins for bowl eligibility. They've got 3 left here. I think they get the win here. I'm very surprised at how short this line is. Obviously, money line shop. I would not want to put my hands in kickers, especially with the wind. So I really like Navy's money line here. I think they win this game.
All right, third game up. ODU in Georgia Southern. This one's 6 o'clock in Statesboro, 6 o'clock Eastern, that is. -6. That's Georgia Southern as the home favorite. 60.5 being the total. Monarchs on the road in Statesboro.
I did not get the memo from Ricky Ronnie that last week was a bye week for Old Dominion. So when I took Old Dominion for the people who I posted on Twitter, I feel stupid because no one told me that they were treating that as a bye week. They played horrendous last week. I mean, and this is a team that all year long has played a lot of one-possession games. They've won some of them. They've lost some of them. But, like, that was just a disgraceful effort by Old Dominion here. You look in this game, conference situation, ODU needs 2 wins for bowl eligibility. They're also a game and a half out in the division. Now, remember, once again, the whole JMU thing comes into play. If they approve the waiver for JMU most likely is the Eastern Division champion. The rest of the teams in the conference, it doesn't matter. If JMU gets denied their waiver, there is an outside shot for Old Dominion to represent that side of the Sun Belt in the championship game. So there's some motivation there. Also for Georgia Southern, who is also in the mix here. So both of them will be watching out for what happens in Harrisonburg this week if something happens. Georgia Southern got the win last week against Marshall. They've got App State coming up on the road. Georgia Southern's the better team here. I'm really disappointed in ODU from their effort at Liberty. I expect a better effort here, but Georgia Southern's the lean in this one.
And Matt, before we go too far with the NCAA making a ruling on this, because it is important for G5 and for James Madison, is there an actual deadline, or are you just A plus B equals C, college game days in town, they're going to want to make the ruling beforehand? Is that what you're going off of?
So there was a tweet that came out as we were doing this podcast that says the committee that is supposed to rule is meeting tonight. And so I think they're going to have a decision by the end. Now, if you're the NCAA and it's a negative one, you're going to try your hardest to wait till Sunday, like 1 o'clock during the NFL. You dump the news. You're not in college game day. You're going to get crushed no matter what, but you want to dump it on Sunday. I don't think it'll last till Sunday. If it's negative, I think it's going to come out. I think it's going to be unfortunate, and they're just going to have a bad 3 hours on college game day. If it's positive, then if it's positive, the NCAA should say, hey, stay tuned to college game day. We're going to announce what's happening to JMU. They announce positive. It's a celebration and everything. So it'll be really interesting, the timing of it, but they are meeting tonight to decide on the waiver, it sounds like.
I like it. A little off the field, maybe some advantages here for the sports bettors. Guys, and Matt brings up, the podcast, every game on the board, wherever you're downloading your podcast at. Purdue Northwestern, one of 2 Big Ten games we're talking here, Matt. I know it's not really up your alley too much, the Big Ten, but it is. Boilermakers -3 as the road favorite. 46.5 being the total. We're talking Purdue at Northwestern.
12 to 15 mile per hour winds in this one, which I think will be interesting because obviously Purdue does a lot of their damage through the air. Something to watch as we continue on here with regards to this game. You look at Purdue. Purdue's got no bowl in their future, but they have a new head coach, and we have seen at times that teams with new head coaches continue to play throughout the season because they want to play well for their coach. They obviously got the win last week over Minnesota. They've got Indiana next week. But I really like this Northwestern story here, Drew. Obviously, entering the season, we all thought, they were going to win 2 games, maybe 3 games, maybe. They're 5-5, so they need one more win for bowl eligibility. They probably won't get it next week at Illinois. They're coming off the really nice win against Wisconsin. The thing is, Northwestern never really has any home field advantage, it seems like. Whenever they play teams, there's always a lot more fans for the opposition than there is for Northwestern. As you said, this is not one of my conferences that I'm strong on, but I would lean to the home team here. I don't know if you have any thoughts on this one.
No, one I'm not going to be involved in, Matt, is we got 353, 354, 2 o'clock Eastern, little Saturday action up next. Kent State and Ball State. Ball State -12.5, -13, depending where we're shopping here. 42 being the total.
Neither team's making a bowl. Kent State's got a new coach. I don't think it's going to matter. They're really bad. Ball State, I don't know what they're playing for, so let's move on. I mean, it's very simple this week for the folks watching, and I understand some people are like, well, I still want to pick in that game. There's so many good games on the board and so many good situations that when you have two teams who aren't making a bowl game, you just don't pay any attention to it and you move on. So let's move on here.
Sure. And the week before rivalry weekend does set up sometimes to be a good weekend to get down on this. We got Rice and Charlotte up next here, also 2:00 Eastern. 47.5 being the total in Charlotte, North Carolina. And it's the Rice Owls, the second Owls here, -2 in the hook as the road favorite.
A little bit of wind involved in this one. Also, got to watch the stats of JT Daniels. Obviously, he did not play last week for Rice. That's huge. It's funny. We talk about, and by the way, Rice needs 2 wins for bowl eligibility, so there's still probably some sort of motivation for this one. But we talk about teams who aren't making bowl games, but they're still motivated. I think Charlotte's one of those teams that's going to still keep trying. They're 3-7. They all love Biff. Like Biff, Coach. I don't even know how to say his last name, so I'm just going to call him Coach Biff. Like they lost the game in overtime last week to Memphis, 44-38. I think Charlotte's going to give it a really good effort. If we find out JT Daniels isn't playing, I kind of like Charlotte here. I think that the 49ers are the rare non-bowl team who are going to try really hard in this situation. So I lean to Charlotte here, especially if JT Daniels doesn't play.
Southern Miss, Mississippi State up next here, guys. This kicks us off on Saturday, 357, 358. 46.5 being the total. Mississippi State -2 touchdowns, -14 at home in Starkville. Little brother, big brother feel here with the two Mississippi schools. Do you like anything in Starkville?
So you got Southern Miss, no bowl in their future, but they're playing good football. And sometimes those bad teams like to start building momentum for next season. Southern Miss coming off the win in overtime over Louisiana. They reassigned and kind of refocused their offense, and now their offense has been really good. And then you got a Mississippi State team that's got the Egg Bowl next week on Thursday. They just fired their coach. They need 2 wins for bowl eligibility. It's one of those things, Drew, like, could you actually get down and hold your nose and bet on Southern Miss here? I don't know. It's always tough to try and guess what kids are thinking after their coach gets fired. It depends on how much they liked him or didn't like him here. But situationally, and you know more about the SEC than I do, Drew, situationally, this screams bet Southern Miss, especially at 2 touchdowns or more.
Sure. Yeah, going up against the big SEC school, it just becomes a question of the new head coach. Sometimes that can, light a fire, with the team. So it's something to watch closely. And then, like you talked about, they got the Egg Bowl. So it's short week. The Egg Bowl's usually, I'm guessing this year on Thanksgiving. It has been the last few years. So something to watch there, guys. We get Illinois and Iowa up next, 3:30 Eastern here. Of course, Iowa playing. So it's a 30 as the game total. -3 across the board. That is Iowa, the Hawkeyes in Iowa City as the home favorite.
I mean, Illinois' offense is bad. Illinois' team is bad. They still do need 1 win for bowl eligibility, and they host Northwestern next week, so that game could be huge for bowl eligibility for both of them. Last year, this game was 9-6. It was brutal. Illinois won 9-6. Iowa needs 1 win to clinch the Big Ten West. They shut out Rutgers 22-0. Everybody's like, you got to look at the over, right? I mean, these numbers are low for a reason. I mean, Iowa's defense is really good this year, and their offense is really bad. I mean, I actually saw Deacon Hill complete a pass down the field like last game. That's how bad he's been for Iowa here. But how can you not bet on them? They're home. Illinois' defense is all right, but not great. To me, the only play here would be Iowa in some sort of situation.
At Mid-Major Matt on Twitter, ESPN Richmond, Syracuse graduate talking the orange up next at Georgia Tech. We are seeing the Yellow Jackets -6.5 point home favorites, 53 being the total. Syracuse at Georgia Tech from Midtown Atlanta, Matt.
I mean, I don't know how anybody is actually worse than Syracuse, but somehow Pittsburgh is. They won that game at Yankee Stadium. That's great, super, whatever. Next game, they play Wake Forest. Syracuse needs 1 win for bowl eligibility. Georgia Tech needs 1 win for bowl eligibility. It's a weird sandwich spot for Georgia Tech coming off of the game against Clemson. They get Georgia at home next week, but obviously they need this game for bowl eligibility. Who knows what we're getting? Georgia Tech's worst losses this year were at home. They lost to BC at home and Bowling Green at home. So it's a really tough game to kind of handicap here. Both teams have motivation. Syracuse isn't good. Georgia Tech has only two more opportunities to get one more win. It'd be really weird if this Georgia Tech team that has some of the best wins in college football wouldn't make bowl eligibility. But I guess that's a possibility if they lose this one and then they lose to Georgia next week.
Matt, rivalry weekend next weekend. But this week we got one here with the Sunflower Showdown. Kansas State in Kansas, 7 o'clock Eastern, prime time here. -7.5. The low water mark as high as -8.5. And that is Kansas State as the road favorite, 56.5 being the total. Kansas with some quarterback kind of injury questions. Should be a good rivalry game. What do you like in Kansas State Sunflower Showdown?
So obviously Kansas State needs this game. They're one game out of first place. They're in 4 teams are tied at 5-2 in that conference. So there's a lot to still be decided. They looked really good against Baylor. One of my wins last week was the Kansas State first half team total over. Baylor, one of the worst teams defensively in the country when it comes to defending the first half. And then Kansas, look, situationally, this was a bad spot for Kansas. You had a Texas Tech team that's motivated. They had the Kansas State game up next. Kansas is 2 games out of first place, so technically things could break their way and maybe they make it to the championship game. There's all sorts of convoluted tiebreakers and things like that. As you said, we got to figure out who the quarterback is for Kansas for this one. Is there a chance they maybe have been saving Daniels for this game? Is Jason Bean going to actually play well in this contest? To me, it's a bet it's really hard to make right now. It would be Kansas or pass, but I really need to get some clarity on the quarterback position.
All right, heading back to the G5 up here. 1 o'clock Eastern, 365, 366, UMass in Liberty. 62 being the total. Liberty -27.5 as the home favorite. So it becomes a question, this is one of the best G5 teams versus one of the worst teams in college football really here, Matt. But I do remember earlier in the season, maybe a month and a half ago, I laid a big number with the Flames, and they didn't come anywhere close to covering. I think it was against Sam Houston. So got a little bit of, happy feet getting back there again with the Flames. Do you think they blow out the Minutemen?
I mean, I think they do, but once again, you gave a large number there. So there's blowout and then there's not covering. UMass, obviously, no bowl game for them, but they are coming off a bye week. And you always have to wonder when these bad teams are coming off late bye weeks, do they get an extra sense of motivation? Did they just want the season to be over? You never know what to think when it comes to a team like this. And then your Liberty, you've clinched your berth in the Conference USA Championship game. You are the home team in the Conference Championship game. You're playing New Mexico State. But there's the G5 standings that are important here. Look, they play the easiest schedule in the country if you're Liberty. They didn't show up in the college football playoff rankings last night for good reason. But if Tulane loses and let's say somebody else loses, maybe Liberty is that team that plays in a New Year's Six bowl. So they've got to keep trying here. UMass allows 21.1 points per first half overall. I might look, and there's only 1 or 2 books that put this out, a Liberty team total over in the first half. UMass coming off the bye week. Liberty's got to impress people. They got to score a lot of points, but will they play these guys all 4 quarters? I like Liberty here in the first half team total over. I think they're going to score a lot of points early so they can get their guys some rest.
Heading to the Conference of Champions for the next 2 here, guys. 367, 368, 2:30 Eastern kick. Utah and Arizona, competitively lined game here, Matt. We are seeing Arizona -1 point home favorites across the board, 44.5 being the total in Tucson.
So normally I'd be sitting here and I'd be saying, well, coming off the letdown of the Washington game, why Utah's not going to show up. This game is over. They're eliminating the Pac-12 standings. But we've talked about it. I have so much respect for Kyle Whittingham. So the battle that's going to be happening in Utah this week is Kyle Whittingham motivating his team versus his team realizing what's actually going on. Arizona's been great this season. Arizona has probably been the sleeper team that nobody really talks about. They're 2 games out of first place. They're 1 game out of second place. So if things break their way, they could play in the Pac-12 championship game. Now, I don't expect them to win the Pac-12 championship game, but it'll be interesting to see what we get from Arizona here. Obviously, they got the rivalry game next week. I actually kind of like Arizona here, Drew. My lean would be to them. I think they're going to be more motivated for this game. I think Utah's going to be a little deflated. And obviously, as I just said, there's things at stake for Arizona. If things break their way, they could play in the Pac-12 championship game.
Absolutely. It is a surprising A surprising setup here for the Wildcats. Guys, shout out to the sponsors of the show, Viva Tequila Seltzer and Bet Online. Viva Tequila Seltzer. We flavored our tequila seltzer because flavor is the spice of life, and we like our drinks with a kick, just as we like to live our lives. Check them out, vivatequilaseltzer.com. Get it shipped to your house, and betonline.ag. You're looking for a sports book? Check out betonline.ag. Perfect setup for BetOnline. Oregon at Arizona State, the second Pac-12 game we're talking here. We are seeing Oregon minus 23.5 point road favorites, but check out BetOnline with minus 24 if you like the underdog here. That is the high watermark, so you can get that extra half a point in your pocket. 54.5 being the total, so we get the Ducks on the road versus the Sun Devils.
There's so many angles to consider to this game. First off, Bo Nix's Heisman push. Obviously, this team wants to do whatever they can to get Bo Nix the Heisman. He's definitely in the mix. I'm guessing he's going to go to New York. So there's that. They're coming off the win over USC. USC is down, but this is still always a large game. And then, of course, you've got the battle against Oregon State. I'm not going to call it what it is, even though, we all know what the title is for the Oregon State game. That's on Friday, short week. So there's that to consider. Oregon is 2-3 against the spread the last 5-6 years, because I think that during the COVID year, there was a kind of weird part to their schedule, and we kind of throw that out anyway. They're 2-3 against the spread the last couple of years before the rivalry game. So therefore, look, if you're Oregon, you have to win the game, and obviously you have to look good doing so. But what's why would you want to blow out Arizona State? Arizona State coming off the win over UCLA. They got Arizona at home coming up next. They're not playing for a bowl. Remember, they had the thing that happened before the season. They have no bowl game. So these last two games are their Super Bowl. I think we get a decent effort from Arizona State in this game. I think they might be able to backdoor cover this thing, maybe late if this thing's interesting, interesting spread-wise. I think there's a chance Arizona State could kick down the back door in this one.
Nice breakdown there, Matt. Shout out to Look Too Much in the chat box on YouTube. Every game on the board, best show on the board. Love it. Shout out to you, as he likes the dogs and not much of an AU fan there. But remember, guys, wherever you're downloading your podcast at, every game on the board. Oklahoma and BYU up next. This is kicking us off on Saturday. So I'm guessing, a 10 a.m. local kickoff. 57 being the total. We are seeing the Sooners minus 24 point road favorites in Provo. Like anything with the Sooners and the Cougars.
You handled that very well, Drew. He just said your school stinks, and he elicited a rivalry game for you. You handled that very well.
I thought he was talking about Arizona. Oh, he's coming at me from the War Eagles. Okay. Well,
isn't it? I'm guessing. Maybe Go Dogs is Georgia, so I'm guessing.
I didn't know who he was. Yeah, I'm guessing they would be the most famous dogs, but there is a bunch of Bulldogs. So, hey, is what it is.
So, all right, Oklahoma and BYU. So I was kind of wrong in terms of I thought Oklahoma was going to be done for the season after they lost that second game. They still in the standings. They're a game out of first in conference, and they're part of that four-way tie for second. They had no problems. They had no hangover whatsoever. They beat West Virginia 59-20. They played TCU at home on Friday, so short week. Last week I was so mad because DraftKings put out an over 2.5 touchdowns bet for Iowa State, and I had been fading in some respect BYU's defense. BYU's defense is toast. They're done. They just, they had some transfers. They've had some injuries. They're just not ready for a full Power 5 schedule. And week after week, they've been getting beaten up. But Iowa State's offense hadn't inspired me, so I passed on the Iowa State over 2.5 touchdowns. Of course, they win the game 45-13. BYU needs one win for bowl eligibility, but I feel like they're almost all right, screw it. We're done. This was a great first year in the conference. We got to figure out how to survive a season like this. But as I said, Oklahoma's got a short week here. Once again, I might look at an Oklahoma team total over. You also said that it's a really early kickoff. That could also complicate things somewhat here. If Oklahoma sleepwalks a little bit, BYU's home, they should get a good crowd. So it's an interesting game with a bunch of different angles here. I wouldn't take Oklahoma to cover this thing. Even if they do, it's a large number. It's an early time, a short week. BYU maybe is motivated for this one. So it's an interesting game in a bunch of different aspects.
Matt, we got Hawaii and Wyoming up next. Hawaii off the big upset win over Air Force, now heading to Laramie. Very difficult place to play. And I believe this is either a noon or 11 a.m. local kick if Wyoming's in the Mountain West or in the Mountain time zone or the Pacific time zone. I'm not 100% sure. Either way, Wyoming, the Cowboys laying 13.5 at home, 45 being the total.
Hawaii with a surprise win over Air Force last week. That was a shock to see that Air Force was not able to do what Air Force does against Hawaii on the islands. You know, Hawaii's got 2 wins for bowl eligibility. They got Colorado State at home. That's a winnable game. You know, Hawaii's going to be pretty motivated for this one. It'll be interesting to see. Wyoming did not look good at UNLV. They play at Nevada next week. They're 2 games out of first place, but they are bowl eligible. Things break right. Maybe Wyoming gets in there, but they have a long shot considering that loss to UNLV. I'll be interested to see what they kind of look like here, Drew. That was a really huge loss to UNLV. Like, they had a lot in front of them and they just didn't show up. And we've talked about it. I'm not a fan of their quarterback here. So not that I'm ever going to say, let's lay the wood with Hawaii away from the islands, especially on an early kickoff. But I just don't know if Wyoming will pull away and win this one in a blowout fashion.
UTEP and MTSU up next. Conference USA here, Matt. And this is one I like. Under 48 is available at BetOnline, betonline.ag. The game starts here. I'd bring that up because it's 47.5 across the board everywhere else. I'm on the under here, Matt. Both of these 2 teams trending under. 3 of the last 4 meetings to the under. Last year stayed under by more than 2 touchdowns. -7.5 sidewise. That is Middle Tennessee State at home as the favorite. It's just Dana Dimmel on the UTEP side of things. They like to kick field goals, run the ball. I think it's a quick game. Do you like anything in the CUSA action?
Nope. This is one of those games like we did earlier, Drew. 2 teams with no bowl eligibility. They're playing for their head coaches, veteran head coaches. Obviously, Middle Tennessee coming off a win, UTEP coming off a loss. I don't want to dabble in games like this with no motivation that I can tell. It's just one of those things where the card's way too good to spend a lot of time. I see what you're talking about here, Drew, but if for some reason, you know, somebody starts figuring out some offense or they start just having fun because they know there's no bowl in their postseason, like that's the one thing I worry about here. But it's for me, it's nothing. I don't mind your under here, but it's just with no motivation. What are we going to expect here?
Sure. Yeah. 2 no bowl teams. I mean, there's volatility come this time of the year in college football, but both teams not going to a bowl game. I think it's a quick game on the ground here. And last thing with MTSU, they had a bye week 3 weeks ago. And since then, they've only given up 19 points. So maybe changing a little bit on defense. I think they hold UTEP at bay. I think they win the game and cover, but even more so, I think it stays under the 48. Again, that 48 available at BetOnline. We got a couple games left here, guys. Then best bets at the end. Louisiana Tech and Jacksonville State. We're seeing JSU -9-point home favorites, 54.5 being the total.
So I lean to Jacksonville State here. Louisiana Tech, this is their last game of the season. They have a bye next week. So this is it. There's no, they're just ending out the string here. They lost to Sam Houston last week. 42 points to Sam Houston. One of the worst offenses, I feel like, in the FBS. And then Jacksonville State, it's interesting. They're coming off the late bye week. They play at New Mexico State next week, but this is their final home game of the season too. Remember, they don't have a bowl. Because they're in their first year of their transition period from the FCS. So, like, this is their Super Bowl here in terms of final home game after a great year. They've been off for last week. I like Jacksonville State here. I think Jacksonville State scores a lot of points. I'll be interested to see what the team total is for this game. I think Jacksonville State's team total over could be a very live thing for this contest.
Are they petitioning the NCAA as well? I mean, they're bowl eligible. I think they have 7 wins, right?
In theory, they could cause a ruckus because I'm pretty sure that they would replace New Mexico State in the Conference USA Championship game. Obviously, tickets have been bought and things like that, so they can't do it. But they're in the first year of their transition. I mean, I guess in theory they could apply for something, but I think they have less of a case than JMU because JMU's in the second year and they're in their first year.
And just to follow up on what we talked about earlier, you're saying this just kind of might change for the future because the money has changed so much. Therefore, a team wouldn't, like Idaho, the Vandals, go back down to FCS. They did that, probably 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah, it's one of those things where there was a certain amount of money you had to have, I think, and it was a really low number that made it really easy. And there were other things, obviously, attendance, facilities, all that stuff, like ticket sales and everything. But like there was a really low buy-in to move up from FCS to FBS. They rose that number tremendously. It was like a couple 100,000 to like a couple million now. So it's a lot harder, at least financially, to make the jump. And that's what they decide to be the deterrent for whatever. I don't know. It's the NCAA.
No,
They suck.
and it's interesting because some of these, people talk about how much money is being made in college football. It's almost like a little bit misrepresentation because it's the top teams making so much money, whereas like the Idaho Vandals, they were having to travel from Moscow, Idaho, all over the Sun Belt, and because of the travel expenses, they actually were losing money. So that's why they decided to go back down. But just something that I remember reading about it, guys. Just a couple games left here. Conference of Champions up again in a really good one. Maybe outside of, JMU, maybe the game of the weekend here. Washington and Oregon State Beavers minus 2.5-point home favorites here to the undefeated Huskies. We get 63.5 as the total. Two teams that looking at this Pac-12 championship game still in reach. And Washington, who knows what the ceiling is? They could still win the national championship. You liking anything in Corvallis prime time Saturday night?
I kind of like Oregon State. I kind of do. We've seen Washington's defense just fall apart the last couple of games. They didn't look great against Utah. And Utah scoring 28 points for Utah, like that's got to be like 55 points for a normal team because Utah's offense without Cam Rising and without the tight end who hasn't played for a while, like Utah's offense has been atrocious this year. So scoring 28 points is a concern. They got the Apple Cup next week. They're not looking ahead to the rivalry game. Obviously, this is a huge one. Washington's in first place. Oregon State is 1 game behind Oregon, 2 games behind Washington here. Oregon State looked really good against Stanford. You could have been concerned about some sort of hangover situation or a look-ahead situation here. They didn't look ahead. Oregon State obviously has the rivalry game on Friday, but I kind of like Oregon State here. I think Oregon State can run the ball with Damian Martinez. I think Oregon State can keep the ball away from Washington. Washington's going to get their points. Now that they kind of discovered they can run the ball, Washington's going to score their points, but can they slow down Damian Martinez? Can they slow down this run game? I don't think they can. I kind of like Oregon State in this one to get the upset.
Guys, 1 game left for this section. We got Pete Loshak and Rob Vino coming up tomorrow to finish off every game on the board for week 12 here, the week before rivalry week. Guys, give Matt Joseph some love on Twitter at Mid-Major Matt, doing a great job this week, obviously, guys. Always does a great job on the podcast. And shout out again to our sponsors of the show, making it happen. Viva Tequila Seltzer. Our flavors pair perfectly with our artisanal Blanco tequila for subtle and refreshing drinks. Viva Tequila Seltzer.com and betonline.ag. You're looking for a sports book, go check them out, guys. betonline.ag. The game starts here. 381-382. New Mexico and Fresno State Bulldogs minus 23-point home favorites. 56.5 being the total in the Mountain West matchup here. Also 10:30 Eastern time slot. So a little bit of a degenerate special fear here, Matt.
This should be a all Fresno sort of situation because Fresno State coming off of the loss. This is one of those things where you would think that Fresno State is just going to, destroy New Mexico. New Mexico, I've loved playing the overs. I didn't play it last week, and thankfully it didn't hit. But I've loved playing overs in New Mexico game because at one point this season with Hopkins, they were actually starting to score some points, and their defense was absolutely atrocious. Then the book started hanging really high numbers, and I started getting scared away, and obviously for good reason, because some of those games they weren't hitting their number here. So, you look at this game, New Mexico's defense. This is one of those things where they have no ball game. They have no nothing. They're going to give up a lot of points here. I'll be very interested to see what the Fresno State team total is. They are 1 game behind Air Force and UNLV in the standings. They do play at San Diego State next week. Fresno State is at their win total for the season. It was 8 before the year, so they're at 8 right now. I think Fresno State should name their score in this situation, and I think, early touchdowns, often touchdowns. I think they're going to score a lot in this one.
Lay the wood, degenerate special feel. Matt, great job as always. Guys, follow him on Twitter at Mid-Major Matt. Matt, any final thoughts here for the show? And are you going to that Navy call for the best bet, or is something else coming to mind?
Yeah, so I kind of do. I wanted to play the Jacksonville State team total over. I just was scrolling on my my app to see if FanDuel put it up yet. They had not put it up yet. I don't know if DraftKings has it up yet. But I think Jacksonville State's going to score a lot of points. This is their final home game. Louisiana Tech is ready to go home. But since we don't have that number, I'm going Navy money line. I think Navy wins. East Carolina, if you're a team that's ready to go into the offseason, do you really want to spend a week just dissecting the triple option? Navy coming off a win. They need 2 wins for a bowl eligibility. 16 to 20 mile per hour winds could take out anything that East Carolina wants to do through the air, at least, for half the game when they're going into the wind. Navy throws the ball a little bit, so they don't really care about this win situation. Give me Navy to win. Give me the Navy money line in this one. Obviously, shop around. I'm sure Bet Online has a tremendous price for this one. But yeah, Navy money line, my best bet for this one.
All right. They're laying 2.5. You can get them on the money line -140. At Mid-Major Matt on Twitter. Matt Josephs, ESPN Richmond. Anything else, Matt, before we shut it down?
Looking forward to Saturday. Obviously, JMU has college game day. I hope the NCAA does the right thing because they are the best group of 5 school. Or if not, let's get a JMU Jacksonville State unsanctioned bowl game, Drew. How about that? Like, you know what? Let's call it something that we can't probably say on the podcast. But let's have JMU and Jacksonville State play each other and have one of the better postseason games that we see this year.
I would love that. I'm surprised teams haven't done that in the past. Just like, hey, get together, fly, meet somewhere, even a home game, and play it. And you can say whatever you want on the podcast. I just try to be respectful because guys have DM'd me on Twitter saying, hey, I like the podcast because you guys don't cuss, because I can listen to it in the car with my kids. So that's the only reason I try to be respectful. But you can say whatever you want.
There's a lot of words I'd like to say about the NCAA, and there's a lot of words that I'd like to call what they're doing to these 2 schools, but I'm not going to do it. But yeah, let's hope that the good news comes about by Saturday. Remember, the good news will affect JMU. If JMU somehow finds out, Drew, that they're going to be approved, they're going to destroy Appalachian State. If somehow they're not approved, I almost think it's a Michigan situation, Drew, where the team bands even closer and they still destroy Appalachian State. So if they don't, watch the line potentially go down, because I think some of the squares will be like, well, they didn't get approved, so they're not going to care. If this number comes down, Drew, I'll hammer James Madison, because I think even if they get a no from the NCAA, they'll play really hard in this one. Final home game of the season. They play at Coastal Carolina next week. So I think I'm playing JMU either way. I just hope some of the square people will take that number down if they don't get approved, so I can still hit it.
And you think the market is that in tune to where when the ruling comes out, it will go from -9 to say above 10 if it is approved, and then maybe even go the other way? You think the market, because it's not necessarily an on the field situation, with an injury.
It's not, but let's say this, Drew. Like I've talked to the JMU players and the coaches this whole season, and I've been stunned. They had one guy transfer out of the program this offseason when they said that basically they couldn't play for a bowl game. It was Isaac Ukwu, and he went to Ole Miss. Like, I can't fault a guy from going to JMU to Ole Miss. Like, it's an SEC school. But like, everybody else bought in, and they bought in all season long, knowing full well that they probably weren't going to play a bowl game. And by the way, Drew, I think we're tracking towards them actually backing their way in, because we may not have enough bowl eligible teams. But like, this team has kind of banded together, and I think it's a Michigan situation. So I feel like the market's going to be like, well, they're not getting a bowl game. Oh, they're going to feel bad. They're not going to play well at home and everything. But I think it's going to be the opposite. I think it's going to be a Michigan situation. Almost like when they said, okay, Michigan, you're not going to have Jim Harbaugh for this game. And Michigan said, damn, who cares? Like, we don't care. We're going to go out and crush Penn State. I think JMU is going to be in the same situation.
Makes total sense, Matt. Great job as always. Huge shout out to the chat box on YouTube. Every game on the board. Pete in the house. Look too much as well. Appreciate you guys chiming in. Feel free to comment below if you're watching on replay. And again, guys, wherever you're downloading your podcast at, please rate and subscribe. Every game on the board. For Matt Josephs, I'm Drew Martin. We'll be back tomorrow with Pete Loshak and Rob Vino to finish out the Week 12 football card. Until then, cash those tickets. Thanks for tuning in.